Hello, good morning, and welcome to the seminar exploring international collaboration and access. I'm Aidan Moesby. I'm a pale-skinned, middle-aged white man with white hair, black-framed glasses, and a stubbly beard. I'm an artist, a curator, and a cultural access consultant. I identify as disabled and neurodivergent, and my pronouns are he, him. I'll be chairing the event today, which is intended more as a shared conversation rather than being talked at. There'll be plenty of time for questions in the second half, where I hope we can begin to explore the issues around disability access, inclusion, diversity, and care in the cultural sector within an international context, particularly the UK and Norway. The event is relaxed and we're trying to hold a safe, respectful space for those present, and we all share that responsibility. Feel free to come and go as you please, turn your camera off and on as you want, but we do ask you to mute your microphones until the question and answer section. There's live captions and British Sign Language available for access. There's also Norwegian Sign Language for those at Theatre Manu, and we'll have a 15-minute pause at 10:55. We have a range of speakers today to share their experiences and reflections. They'll introduce themselves briefly now, and first up we have Trish Wheatley.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Trish Wheatley. I'm a white woman with medium length blonde hair, wearing a kind of OT jumper today with a messy background, full of lots of art. I'm the Chief Executive of Disability Arts Online. Tina?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tina. I am the leader of NUK. I am a white woman. I have brown hair, blue eyes, and a green woolen sweater on me. And I have my hair up in a messy bun. And in my office, I have a suitcase with the merchandise from my festival and a drawing made by one of my favorite young kids that I am happy to be a lot with. So yeah.
Shall I go next? My name
is... Sorry, I lost my internet. Talk about international collaboration.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost my internet. So sorry, Stina.
Hello, my name is Stine Nilsen. I am Artistic Director of CODA, Oslo International Dance Festival. Today I am here with you in my office in Oslo with a green plant in the background and some CODA posters. I am a pale-skinned woman in my 40s. I have black-rimmed glasses. I wear a green jumper. I identify as non-disabled. But I have a long experience of working from the UK with Kanduko Dance Company, which is an inclusive dance company of dancers with disabled and non-disabled dancers.
Thank you. Do we have Georgie here?
We do.
Hi,
hello,
Georgie.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Georgie Rose. I work for the Norwegian National Ballet, and I was part of the collaboration with CODA Dance Festival, creating Unbeknown, which we'll speak about later. I'm a 31-year-old woman from England, pale-skinned, very long ginger hair. Today I'm in my comfy blue stripy top and trackies. I identify as non-disabled. And today I am in a room in the Opera House that I didn't even know existed until 5 minutes ago, when I realized the room I'd booked for this talk wasn't free. So red board behind me and what looks like a sort of Microsoft PowerPoint board in the back. Nothing fancy, I'm afraid.
Thank you. And we'll be coming back to everybody for more conversation and talks later. So we're going to start with a short film of around 15 minutes, showing an overview of the collaborative work with Disability Arts Online and Nuk at Festspillene in Nord-Norge before hearing from Stina and Georgie talking about their working together at Coda Dance Festival in Oslo. After the break, we'll hear from Trish and myself before opening it up to the floor. Please feel free to briefly introduce yourselves in the chat with who you are and where you work and your email if you wish. Also, please use the chat for comments and questions. The seminar is being recorded until the questions and answer session, which will not be recorded, and hopefully that allows for a more open conversation. So we'll move now to the film, which is an overview of the project that we shared working with Dow, myself, and Nuk. Joe, if we can have the film, please.
So we do have a fully audio described version of this film, which I will share the link to in the chat. But for now, I'm just going to give a quick introduction to it. So it's a fast-cutting documentary style film exploring the Nuk Photo Project 2022. The film is set in Harstad, a coastal town in the far north of Norway. It's a dramatic landscape with mountains and ocean. The establishing shots feature boats, rolling green hills, and some urban scenes. Visually, the film switches between to-camera interviews, on-site landscapes, and the project participants carrying out their photography assignments. Footage of festival activities from Festspillene, such as street performances and music concerts, also feature. Photographs taken by the participants are shown on screen at points. Full alt text for all the images are available on the project website. And in the first section, we hear from Aidan, who's already described himself, and Paul Henrik, who's a white man in his 30s with short hair and glasses. Here we go.
Here we are, 26 degrees above the Arctic Circle, and it's 26 degrees C. We're roasting here. The snow's on the hills melting. This is climate change in action. This is part of the reason why we're where we are, doing what we're doing. I'm Aidan Moesby, and I'm here in Harstad doing an international collaboration project funded by the British Council. My role in the project is as a disabled artist.
My name is Paul Henrik Ekheim, and I work for the National Museum of Photography in Norway, called Prøys Museum, where my job title is Diversity Curator. So Nuk is an inclusive arts festival during the Arctic Arts Festival in Harstad in northern Norway. And during the festival week, there's multiple workshops being arranged for a diverse group of teenagers and disabled participants. So what we do during Nuk is we hold a week-long workshop based around various photography tasks, and the work is also collected and exhibited towards the end of the week.
My name is Silje. I'm a museum educator here at Trasta Samlinger Sør-Troms-museum. So we are currently at Pavilion 7, a building from 1966. This used to be part of the Central Institution for People with Disabilities. Today I've taken the group on a tour of the museum. We have a complete, authentic part of the institution. And I've been telling them about the story of this place, why it came to be, and how life at the institution was, basically. You know, they sent people here from all over northern Norway. They had to leave their homes and came here basically to live the rest of their lives. They might not have realized it yet, but some of the people who are in our group this week would have been the people who were sent here. At most, this institution had almost 400 inhabitants. They gave them classes in arts and crafts and realized that some of the inhabitants were quite good at making art, basically. During the years, they kept making art, they kept making exhibitions showing the art off, and today the art collection of our museum comes from that. And we have 26,000 pieces of art made by the inhabitants. We've also added quite a lot of outsider art from around all of Norway and also internationally the past years, so it's grown to be quite a large collection.
So on our way here we collected some natural materials, things we found on the beach. the young people made designs on their papers, exposed them to the sun, and then we washed and fixed them. And cyanotype is that amazing blue colour. The group that we're working with, there's some disabled people, there's some non-disabled people. We're additionally working with some Ukrainian refugees living in the north of Norway. So that's bringing a very mixed group with a mixed experience around like barriers and access and inclusion all into the project. What better place to be than somewhere like Trastad, which has its history, which, you know, was very alive, and now it's into a museum. So it's important to have that kind of context as we think about how to work better moving forward. So today was all about how man and nature relate to each other, how one impacts and affects the other. So we went for a walk to the beach, and along the way each of the young people had chosen a colour to focus upon and took photos of that colour and varying shades of it. And then when we got to the beach, we kind of began to explore time, short time scale, such as like, you know, living organisms, shells, trees, that kind of thing, through to the much more kind of geologic time. And some of that also included how man had impacted the beach. So there was like rope on the beach from maybe fishing or a plastic bottle. We got back to the classroom, so each of the participants had 5 photos, and we asked them to rank them in order of 1 to 5, and then also give it a title. And you know, they all had really good photos, and then also they really thought about the titles. And then we came to this gallery. They hung their work, and then we looked at the way that they'd hung their work, and they'd all hung it individually, and then I asked them to rehang it, and then you can see the results of one of them behind me, that they'd really thought about how the work sit together. It was clear that they had kind of got an understanding of how images work, and then also how things might look in the gallery together. Paul Henrik put the exhibition up with the photos printed at a much larger scale. We came across to the gallery and everybody got to see it for the first time, and yeah, the young people were like really excited to see their images on the wall in a completely different context, like in a proper nice exhibition space. The result is just so good and the work is so strong and everybody's contributed.
For the photos and the way we've set it up is we've tried to kind of mix all the participants together as one group. And in some instances it can be the fact that it's a color linking the images together. But the narrative kind of shifts as you walk around the exhibition, and we've tried to kind of divide it into happy zones and zones that are a bit more serious thematically. But I think it's the mix between the joy and the very serious subject matters in this exhibition that makes it work. The fact that half of it is about happiness and friendship and just swimming in a lake, whereas underneath the surface there is anxiety and there is trauma, and I think it becomes very strong because it has both those aspects.
My name is Isabel Fredheim. I'm from Hitler's. I love taking pictures. My favorite photo has to be, it's called a fireball. It's fun because no one knows what it is, only me. That's pretty cool.
Pavlo Balashov from Lviv, Ukraine. That's my Ukrainian friends on a FaceTime with me, so that's like memories. They are celebrate a birthday of my brother together, so they called me to celebrate with them.
My name is Fredrik. I am from Harstad in Norway. I have found so many friends. And I have also had many photos with them, and I have had a very enjoyable time.
My name is Dasha. We're from Morocco.
Моє ім'я Женя, я із України.
Не буду про Кристину.
Perfect week, the best week of her life. It's very interesting to watch how people react for photos. They watch moments of our life, and it's very cool.
My name is Emma and I'm from Kirkenes. I've learned through photo how to analyze a picture with the contrast between the colors and when you focus or unfocus on a picture. It is called perspective because you see my perspective, I see all this, and you also see the reflection of me.
We're at Trondenes Museum, part of the Troms museums, which also includes Trastad. We took the project down, which we had installed in the centre of town in Harstad, and we've brought it out to Trondenes, and we've reinstalled it where it will sit for several more weeks so that it gets a longer exposure and that it also ties in with the cultural life of the city. All the work is going to be archived and acquisitioned, you know, so that there's real meaning behind the work that everybody does, and that's like, for me, that's really important, that it's not just gestural, that there's a real intent and a follow through. We're also here from the UK to work in a collaborative way with Nook and to talk around inclusion and diversity and disability. So there's also been those conversations going on, and that's like incredibly exciting. Well, I have two highlights. One was going to Trastad and seeing the Outsider Art Museum, and then also doing the cyanotypes and how everybody worked together.
Yeah, to me it will always be the youth coming together and growing as much as they do during the week. But yeah, collaborating with great people is always nice.
For me, I guess it was just seeing it kind of finally coming together at the end of the week, and finally all participants coming together at the end of the week with an exhibition that actually made a lot of sense to them and that felt very meaningful to everyone involved. And I must say also the fact of having 5 Ukrainians just running around being teenagers in this day and age was fantastic.
I think it's easy maybe to look at some of the images and think they've just taken an image, but then when you maybe think a little bit more about the context, about where we are, above the Arctic Circle, but it's been an extremely warm week, but then also it's like the political element as well. And even though it's easy to think we're in the northern Arctic, kind of separate from the world, it's like we aren't. We're all connected, and it's that fluidity of borders and boundaries. There's some concerns which are shared amongst people and cultures.
Thank you, Joe. So personally, that was quite nice to see you again and bring back the memories of working in Harstad with Nook. We're just going to take 5 minutes or so to reflect on that and hear from Trish and Tina about the context of working together and the reasons why, and some reflections about that. So would you like to start, Trish?
Sure, thanks, Aidan. And I guess you were the kind of instigator of all this. We've worked with Aidan quite long term with various different collaborations and supported Aidan's practice over a long period of time, which culminated in an associateship with us from 2018 to 2020. And then after that sort of quite intensive relationship where we did exhibitions and supported Aidan's practice as a curator and artist, we were looking to kind of take the next step with that, and we thought a large-scale project would be a really good way to do that. At the same time, we have been doing a lot of international work on behalf of the British Council through a contract that through which we create content for their website, which is called Disability Arts International. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that website. But this was the point at which we really wanted to branch out on our own and do something that was instigated by us as well. So there was the circumstances for international work that we wanted to do and something that Aidan wanted to do that created this space for and desire to collaborate internationally. And in Nook we found an amazing partner, because we don't do a lot of work with young people, and they're obviously really expert at this, so it just all sort of fell together through a series of conversations. How about you, Tina? Do you want to talk a bit about kind of how it came together?
Yes, it came together because Aidan sort of said, hello, I exist. And do you want to work with me? And of course, yes, my answer was yes. Because Aidan is a great artist and an amazing artist. And Trish and Joe and the gang at Disability Arts Online have such great experience in working with access and inclusion for so many years. And, you know, looking at the video, I'm like, that's great. We're doing great. And then, you know, it's also about, you know, making this festival is about making a lot of wrongs. So it looks really inclusive, but of course there are a lot of non-inclusive elements at the festival. And being part of a critical friendship where Aidan and Trish and Joe comes in and takes a closer look at what we do and start asking questions about certain things and elements that are non-inclusive and with their background and experience is crucial for further development. But of course it was scary, and I was afraid in the beginning. I was like, ooh, what if they call me out? Like, I say I'm an inclusive festival, and then they will come and understand that it's a lot of the times not, but I am trying to fix it, you know, sort of defending oneself, because it's not something that I want to be. I do not want to be a non-inclusive festival. I want to be an inclusive festival, but it's a way to get there. But of course, they did not judge me. They know all about this, and that was the greatest experience. Them sort of bringing me into a safe space where critical conversations about one's practice is quite natural. So for me, the international exchange have been a lot about entering a critical friendship. And I, of course, have those in Norway as well. But there is something about also bringing totally new perspectives in. It is also a critical friendship working with the university here and with Frøys Museum and Trasta, as you met in the video. But bringing perspectives from the UK is also important because a lot of work have been done there for so many years. So yeah, that was my notes.
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of kind of the outcomes, actually, it's at Disability Arts Online, we talk a lot about process, and we support artists to talk a lot about process. And it was actually the sort of the delivery of the project, that process that enabled us to have those conversations and, you know, learn things from each other. So, and one of the things that I definitely learned from Nook is about preparation. Preparation is everything. yeah, to see something on that scale with that many kids involved and the huge sort of amount of preparation that has to happen was incredible, really. And then also just the amazing opportunity that we got through the funding to actually be involved in a project, like in depth, in a place, in a location at a particular time, is just something that, like, I don't think you can get that online, and we do a lot of online work. There is something really amazing about being in a specific location and understanding that context. And, you know, it's the things around the project, like chatting at the dinner table, or in the moment when you're solving a problem and you get an exchange of ideas. All of that is just so valuable.
Can I just come? Yeah, can I so thinking, a lot of organizations think, oh, we won't do this because we might get it wrong. And you talk about being inclusive. And I think some organizations, no matter where we're working, talk about inclusion and diversity and access, but they don't follow through. And I think from the very first moment of coming into contact with you, Tina, the fact that you responded to my email out of the blue and were open in that way, just to a conversation and just to see what might happen or where can we go. And, you know, that was kind of inclusion and access in action. And then I think, you know, for me being an artist in the UK, it's interesting to, like Trish was saying, you can't beat being in a different location and understanding the context and getting that experience there. And because, yes, you know, the history of disability arts in the UK is well established, but Norway is a completely different country with a completely different set of historical elements around disability and inclusion. And I think that it's not just about that. It's not just about the access and inclusion in a very kind of practical sense. It's also about thinking about inclusion in a much wider sense, and care. And I think care is really, really important. I'm always going on about care, whether it's for artists or audiences or institutions. And just those kind of things that, you know, by providing dinner at the festival and providing, like, there was so many people supporting the young people, and also we could talk to anybody. I don't know how to, because one of the elements that I really struggled with was, one, I was in like Norway, and then we're working in Norwegian, but then also how do we work with Ukrainian refugees who have a completely different set of experiences, and also their trauma from the war, and they're just teenagers also. So there's, you know, and then how do we make it so that the people in the room who don't have extra support needs or who aren't disabled, how do they feel included? Because often it's like, you know, it's like the noisy child gets all the attention. And how can we not forget about those who aren't having the additional needs? And yeah, so, you know, and those conversations, and you talk about getting things wrong. It was like, well, you know, I was getting things wrong all the time because I was coming from a different context. And so just having that, you know what, it's okay to get it wrong. Let's have a conversation about that, and how do we make it better? Do you have a response, Tina, or do you want to?
Sorry, yeah, I was just thinking that I agree upon everything you say, and that those elements of conversation also comes from sort of collaborating in Norway, you know, with Nonna at the university. It's sort of creating the platform for critical conversation also, because we have a lot of different people working at our festival. Some of them are educated in art, but some of them are also educated in totally different sort of fields, health and care and such. And all of these people are in the conversation at NUK about how we should do things. And you know, so yeah. So I was just glad to hear that was something that felt good, having all of that surrounding you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think, like, talking about, borders, boundaries, and the international collaboration, it was really useful that even though we were working with Nook, that we got to take part in an industry conversation with the three of us spoke about disability arts and access within that, within an international setting, and kind of it had the feel that it's not just this one conversation, that it's moving on. And I was wondering, what's your intention? How can Nook or Festspillene and Nord-Norge kind of become more inclusive for not just the audiences, but also and the young people, but the audiences, the artists, the organization?
Yeah. Well, one of the questions that you asked me during the festival is, when is this festival going to be inclusive for you and the staff? And I have never thought of that ever before, because I am not the focus of making an inclusive festival. It's always been about the artistic leaders and the participants. But of course, if I'm going to create an inclusive space, I also, it has to happen everywhere. It can't just happen one place, because when it's not inclusive for my staff, that will spread because they have stress or anxiety or, so that will spread throughout everything. So, and then the question about care, as you were talking a bit about before, that was a bit of a new question, or it's not a new question. I just haven't thought of that in terms of, oh, that includes the staff. So next year, we're really trying to change the whole logistics of the festival because of that. So that is sort of my first, that is my first priority now, looking at the logistics, where we are at and where we work, and what is the distance between where we work, so that, it's more manageable for us working around the participants. And then hopefully it will be a more inclusive space also for the participants. So that's sort of my first on my priority list. But of course, there are many more things that I need to do in order to get this right.
Yeah, and hopefully there'll be the opportunity to unpack some of these issues in the second half of the seminar when we open it up to the floor.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you'd like to add, Trish, before we move on to Stina and Georgie?
I'm speaking later. Let's stick to the timetable, and I'm sure you'll hear from me again.
Okay, thank you. And also just a reminder that you can put questions in the chat, and we'll come back to them later on in the second half. So now we're going to hear from Stina Nielsen, who works for Coda, and Georgie, working with Coda, who was the ballet, National Ballet. So over to you, Stina.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you guys today and to be part of this conversation on international exchange. I just wanted to give a little bit of background. So I am Norwegian. I work in Norway for the festival, which had its 20th anniversary last year. But as I mentioned earlier, I also worked in the UK for about 20 years with Candico Dance Company and with inclusive work specifically within the dance field in the UK. And so when returning back to Norway in 2017 to take up the role as the artistic director for the festival, I of course came with the lenses of coming from a field of arts and dance that is very much been working on literally practical access and inclusion for audiences, but also very much in the UK, especially I'd say since 2012 when the Olympics happened and the Paralympics happened in the UK, have added a lot more funding towards developing disabled artists in the UK. So when I came back to Norway to run the festival, which is in itself is just a dance festival, hasn't got a particular mandate or vision to be inclusive, but of course I was bringing my experience from working inclusively to the festival and my vision for making sure that within the programming of the festival we were programming works by deaf and disabled artists as well as non-disabled artists, and that we were trying as much as we could to create access for audience, of course for artists being part of the festival, but also secondly for audiences. And so since 2017 we've been working very passionately really about trying to create access with sign language interpretation for our shows. In 22 we managed also audio description for the first time, but it's been a slow process, and it's been something that has taken time to really settle into the organization, and rather than just being a desire or a wish. And secondly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the context in Norway, because I think also that we have a few international guests in the part of the seminar, and also just to acknowledge that there has obviously been people in Norway working inclusively. So NUK, for example, for many, many years running the festival and the workshops with young people with learning difficulties and other disabilities. Also Tone Pernille Østen, a choreographer based in Trondheim, who set up the Inclusive Dance Company and also Danselaboratoriet there about 20 years ago. Dissimiles, X-Ray, there has been quite a few organizations in Norway working with disability. But it might not have been as clearly visible in the professional arts field as I was used to in the UK. And secondly, I think that we as a festival, we work with a lot of partner venues in Oslo. So we work with Dansens Hus, we work with the opera, we work with Riksscenen, with Black Box Theatre, with Bergen Kulturhus. And so as a festival, we have an opportunity and a role to play through our programming and through our collaboration with different venues, having a really practical impact on each other and developing through that collaboration. And we've also seen that programming of disabled artists has happened, of course, around Norway too. There has been several artists known in the UK, like Claire Cunningham, Candico Dance Company, Cindy Runude, Michael Turinsky, Doris Ulich, several back-to-back just won the Ibsen Prize in Norway, you know. So obviously we have Tete Manu, who's been working many years with deaf theatre, you know. So we have artists working in the National Theatre with Disabilities. So really there is actually more than what first seems to come across when, for example, for me, when I came back to Norway. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I think sometimes we feel like it's an upward struggle of not seeing enough. And I think that is still the case, but I want to acknowledge that there is actually quite a lot going on. Then to the practical thing of our project that we made last year in the 2022 festival, in Coda Festival, which was a great collaboration with the Opera House, Norwegian National Ballet and Opera. About 2 or 3 years ago, we started talking about wanting to not think about just access for audiences, but to make a project that would have an impact on local dancers, as well as being an international collaboration. So I think for me, this is quite an important point, that to have international collaborations, I think it's really important that somehow it embeds in the local context. And in order to leave a legacy, like Aidan was talking about too, in order to have a lasting impact, I think collaboration with Norway-based artists needed to be at the heart of the collaboration. So the practicalities were these. We were working with 5 dancers that had been through the outreach program at the Opera House, på Torhav. And we were going to work with Georgie Rose, who's a dancer with the National Ballet, and we had the opportunity to be part of their talent choreographic development for female choreographers as part of the Opera House's choreographic focus. And we, as a festival, Coda, we invited Mark Brew, who's an Australian, UK-based choreographer, to come and work with us. We knew that Mark had a lot of experience, similar to Aidan, has been working many years on a very professional level in many different settings. And we also knew he had a lot of experience from working in big institutions. So he's used to working with bigger organizations, institutions like operas for the development of their work. So we managed to get funding, co-funding together with the Opera House, Nordic Culture Fund, Stiftelsen, our usual Arts Council funding, and pulled it all together to commission Mark to make a work together with Georgie Rose. A 20-minute work that was shown during the festival. So it was a new premiere, new production, working with 5 dancers based in Oslo and 4 dancers recruited from the Nordic countries and the UK. So 9 all in all, working together through several workshops throughout the whole spring of 22, and then working together for 3 weeks during the summer and in October to come together for the premiere. So that was the sort of set out, that we wanted this international collaboration, but with a clear local embeddedness. I know Mark from before. I knew that I could trust that he had the experience needed to make this space possible and to engage the dancers. And I wanted but I wanted to invite Georgie along with me today to speak rather than Mark, because again, I just think it's interesting to have that local perspective of where we are in Norway and to know that Georgie is still here. Mark is back in the UK. He'll keep touring the world and doing his big things. But it's great to know that we have experience both from Rosie as a choreographer, Georgie, sorry, as a choreographer, and the dancers. So I think on a very practical level, I asked Georgie to speak a little bit about what happened in the studio. How did Mark do this? What was the result? And later on, I will post a little link in the chat, because we also have made a documentary similar to what Aidan and Civility Arts Online did about the actual project that you could watch in hindsight. So Georgie.
Thank you so much, Stina. And don't worry, lots of people call me Rosie, so it works as well. So hello, everyone. I'm going to focus just on a couple of the sort of experiences and areas of knowledge that I gained through this process, but I'll give you a very quick little extra summary of me. I'm a full-time ballet dancer at the Norwegian National Ballet. I've lived here 8 years in Norway. It's my home, my second home, of course, but originally from England. As well as a ballet dancer, I'm a developing choreographer, and I've created work here for the Oslo Opera House, also for Pantarei Dance Theatre, and also for the Lindbergh at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden. So I keep my little British connection there, but I was really honored to be the choreographic assistant on this collaboration. It was truly the most educational and inspiring experience I've had in my entire career, to be honest. So firstly, I'd like to just discuss an element of the audition process that I had never experienced and given so much importance to. And this was led by Mark, where we actually had interviews with the individuals after the physical workshop. And this was to understand things like why they particularly wanted to be involved in this project, trying to gain a sense of their openness to the voices of others, generally a feeling of how much they'd be invested in this process and the opportunity. Because in this, they weren't just vessels for material and retaining, choreography. They had to be really crucial cogs in the machine. And Mark knew that this was just as much a crucial part of the audition as their dance ability. Mark, it was spoken about by some people before, but this idea of the safe space, Mark created this from day one, and it just increased throughout. It was really beautiful to see, and this permitted incredible levels of communication among all of us, which we know is vital for gaining new knowledge. It really made, in my opinion, this communication with the knowledge made this an investment for Norway and all of the artists involved, because that knowledge will stay with us, it will be passed on, and it will be developed. So inspired by Mark and his safe space approach from the beginning, I suggested a safe space practical workshop for questions and sharing. with particular attention to wheelchair mechanics. Time was a real gift in this process, and that's thanks to the funding that we had, that we were able to give a good few hours to just simply asking questions and having this discussion. And, you know, time is not always, I think it's sometimes overlooked, the importance. But in this project, it really was vital. So very grateful for that. You know, being able to admit like our lack of knowledge in some areas it's not a shameful thing, but it can sometimes feel it. We have to know everything all the time. We can't admit ignorance on a single subject, even if we have no experience or have never had any exposure to it yet. But being permitted to have this space and to ask these questions is the only way that we learn and grow and truly invest in bettering ourselves and therefore the world around us, which, you know, helps us lead to actual progress when we bring that transparency and that trust to be vulnerable and just say, I don't know, teach me, educate me, help me learn, help me understand. When we can't do that, I feel like I'm sure you agree, progress comes to a grinding halt. So this space was really a special gift. When it came to the wheelchair focused time, I'm just going to give you a little list for speed of some kind of things we discussed to give you an idea. Bearing in mind this is dance. We had the strongest and weakest parts of the chair for external weight bearing. Identifying the individual's chairs and how they differed, having that constant awareness when you were dancing with them. Balance, the different wheels, the different angles meant different weight distribution in partnering. Getting in and out of the chair, what kind of assistance was okay or not needed, and the different ways that we could partner each other and the strongest points of connection for the grips with choreography. We even had an open discussion on falling in the studio, and I had many a scraped knee myself. And after this workshop, I must admit, I felt, and I could see it in the dancers too, so much more confident and secure. I mean, I always made sure as the choreographic assistant to get in there myself before asking somebody to try something. But I did see that in leading with that confidence and the knowledge I'd learned, we saw this big progress in how the dancers felt they could approach the work. They felt safe with people to just communicate their uncertainties, and we were able to push the material in a way we wouldn't have been able to without this discussion, I feel. So all of these dancers came from very different backgrounds, and some had very little experience. Some had never picked up material, which is maybe a habit that we grow and develop when you train from, you know, very, very young age or at certain dance orientated schools. Even then, it's not always easy to pick up. And one of the dancers was finding it actually very challenging, retaining the movement sequences. And this had really been weighing on my mind. And as someone that's been told my brain's wired a little bit differently to many, I'm always looking for new ways to connect to my own ability and my own access, my own potential, which isn't always the common method used in dance. But we managed to see a big leap in progress. Sorry, excuse my snuffly nose of my cold. A big leap in progress after I watched a documentary, just a little one, that had a focus on memory and how people could remember these crazy long numerical sequences. And I thought about trying to take these principles that they used into the studio the next day. To give you a little quick summary, I don't know how long I've been speaking, so I'll go a bit quick. Hope I'm okay for time. So the three strongest things for forming memories are a story, a narrative, kind of in one. They show that the brain pays closer attention when the information is in the form of a narrative. More brain cells are activated when the memory is associated with a time and a place. And finally, we can strengthen the memory through emotional connections, emotional experiences. There's this amygdala that upregulates the hippocampus, which is in the brain, allowing us to just have more detailed, stronger memories. Basically, you associate things you want to remember with structures already in your mind, and it makes it easy to remember. So I thought, can we hijack this to remember a sequence, not words or numbers, but of movement choreography. And the next day, it was my turn to set some material in the studio. Mark trusted me with that. And I had like a little section for myself, Georgie Storm. And I decided to try this here. And we saw a big difference in the way that the choreography was digested and remembered. And I placed it with, I gave them emotion, imagined a place, events happening within the space, how that made them feel, the directions this would take them. I used this to make the dynamics and the pathways and the body movements. And it was really special to see how, how it did have a positive effect. And it's something I'd really like to continue developing in the future and investigating its potential effectiveness in dance, this different way of remembering material. I actually mentioned of this this piece, this collaboration with Coda, in my final closing seminar of the Women's Choreographic here at Norwegian National Ballet, because I just felt compelled to share with the staff here, the sponsors of our opera house, the inspiration that that this collaboration had brought to the whole opera house. And I really hope to keep sharing the inspiration that this brought me and many people, and help in the progress of inclusive art, and hopefully aiding in creating more actual opportunities here in Norway, and not just theory. But this was certainly a big step, and I can't express how grateful I am to Coda and to Norwegian National Ballet for allowing me, a British ballet dancer, to be a part of this. And I sincerely hope it's not the last time, but the first of many. So thank you.
Thanks, Georgie. That's well, I mean, you brought up so many things in there that I think would be really good to return to. Things like, you know, just thinking about the practical sides of like the different chairs are all different, as in all people are different.
Yeah.
One disability doesn't fit everybody, you know, the same disability is different with each person who experiences it. And thinking about the memory and what's needed in the room, and you talked of trust and not knowing, and you know, the knowledge, and also I think thinking about time as well, and what we talk about in the UK as crip time, that things work differently and we have a different time scale working with disability. And yeah, and I guess like coming through is that the access, and thinking about access and inclusion for, you know, the parts of society who experience disability or impairments. It's like, if we make it accessible and inclusive for one part of society, then we can make it more accessible. Like everybody benefits from a safe space, for example, not just those with, you know.
Exactly, yeah. How
So
was this a unique experience I hadn't had before, you know?
So that I mean, thanks for sharing. That was really interesting. I could have listened to that longer. We have reached the space where we're going to have a pause, and so thank you to Tina and Trish, Stina and Georgie. For now, we're going to have a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back. We're going to hear from Trish a little bit more, and I'll say something about my experience of access and inclusion as an artist in Norway, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So thank you very much, and we'll come back in 15 minutes. That's 10 past the hour. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Sorry, I was just making some notes. Yeah, thanks to the speakers in the first part. I would just like to remind you about putting your details about where you're from and your name in the chat if you would like to do that. Just to repeat that this is a relaxed environment or a relaxed event, so feel free to come and go, turn off your microphones, and turn off your cameras if and when you want to. We're going to hear from Trish Wheatley, a little bit of context around disability arts in the UK, and then I'm going to possibly respond to that, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So if you can put your, I mean, we've heard quite a lot this morning, and I'm sure, you know, people have questions, so please put them into the chat, and then we'll open up the floor. That section will not be recorded. Okay, so Trish, if you would like to kick off the second half of the seminar. Thanks.
Thanks, Aidan, and apologies to any UK-based people who know all of this stuff very well, but thought it was important to sort of start at the beginning to show where we've come from. So disability arts started in the UK as a genre and movement in the 1980s, growing out of the disability rights movement, which fought for the rights of disabled people to live independently. The campaigns were underpinned by a philosophy and approach that very clearly defines disability as the barriers in society which act to disable a person rather than a medical condition or impairment that they may have. This perspective is called the social model of disability, and it empowered disabled people to fight for their rights to access public transport, buildings, and so on. The arts were a strong component, from campaign posters and songs through to cabaret events, which brought disabled people together to express themselves and their lives and build community. By the 1990s, strong disability community hubs had grown up all around the country, and a number of disabled people were developing as artists, performing artists, visual artists, and poets. The Disability Discrimination Act came into law, requiring public services to be made accessible. Some groups obtained Arts Council funding. People began to see disability arts as an art movement, defined as art made by disabled people about the experience of disability, largely for audiences of other disabled people. The Arts Council and arts institutions generally viewed this as community art, which was worthy of some funding in order to widen participation, but not appropriate for main stages and large galleries. Funding policies changed in the 2000s with a drive towards professional practice and excellence. This led to many disability arts forums being closed across the country. Our organisation, Disability Arts Online, was born out of a need to keep artists and communities connected, this time digitally, and for disabled artists to have their work critiqued and reviewed in a meaningful way, because National Arts Press generally avoided disabled artists because they didn't know how to talk about the work and were scared of approaching disability as a subject. At the same time, individual artists were funded to make work, and organisations grew up, such as Canduco Dance Company, Stopgap Dance, and Grey Eye Theatre Company. These developed as examples of high quality professional work. In 2012, we saw a significant shift, mainly brought about by the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. The Channel 4 television coverage of the Paralympics and the opening ceremony thrust disabled people into the public eye like never before. They were achievers and being respected in a new way. The Cultural Olympiad, which ran alongside the Games, funded a programme called Unlimited, which commissioned the most ambitious artworks by disabled creatives. It has to be said that at the same time as all of this, austerity measures were in place, and there was a rising rhetoric around benefits cheats, demonising disabled people in the press. You were either a super crip or a scrounger, and there was no space or consideration for the everyday disabled people just wanting to get on with their lives. In the last decade, Unlimited has continued to commission large-scale work. Arts Council England and other national UK arts funders and the British Council have funded and worked strategically to support and promote the work of professional disabled artists. Arts Council England developed the Creative Case for Diversity, which argues that programmes become richer and more interesting, attracting a wider range of audiences if there is diverse representation within those programmes. Also in the UK, disabled people have become more visible in mainstream theatre, media and TV. For example, actor Liz Carr winning an Olivier Award for her portrayal of Dr. Emma Bruckner in The Normal Heart at the National Theatre. Also, Lee Ridley, known as Lost Voice Guy, the stand-up comedian, who won the 2017 edition of Britain's Got Talent. And another great example, Rose Ayling-Ellis, the EastEnders actor who became BBC's Strictly Come Dancing, their first deaf contestant, and also won the series in 2021. So where are we now? There is more variety in the work and the intentions behind it. There is also a wider audience for the work, which is more often aimed at non-disabled audiences. Because of this, it doesn't really feel like a movement in the way that it did in the early years. At Disability Arts Online, one of our functions, publishing our online journal, is to platform the range of voices and approaches. We do not say that disability arts has a single fixed definition. We reflect back the work that is being made, the dialogue that is happening, including the contradictions when they occur. The work disabled people make isn't always about disability, but there's always an interesting or different angle to the subjects they choose to tackle. Inclusion and programming of work has developed in some art forms more quickly than others. The case has been successfully made for how disabled bodies can bring new aesthetics and movement language to dance. The aesthetics of access can be experienced by audiences within some large-scale touring theatre works. Mental health is both a richly explored subject and an important consideration in accessible contracts and terms of engagement. Access for neurodivergent people is better understood so that people whose brains work differently can engage in a way that's accessible for them. Relaxed performances are a good example of this. Access riders, which explain a disabled artist's access requirements on their own terms to venues and collaborators, were pretty much unheard of 10 years ago, but are becoming much more commonplace now. The conversation around disability is much more nuanced, particularly around the intersections between ableism, racism, and other forms of oppression that are beginning to be understood, acknowledged, and explored creatively. This all sounds really positive and progressive, but I have to say that I fear I live in a bit of a bubble where access has become the norm. It has to be said, there are definitely areas within arts and culture which are not so clued up on all of this. And there is still a lot of work to do to ensure disabled artists can be an equal part of our UK arts and cultural sector. There are still many barriers to overcome. At Disability Arts Online, we've been calling on the visual arts sector to step up and engage in a conversation. For too long, disabled artists have been pigeonholed into the community engagement areas of galleries and not taken seriously as artists in their own right. We've championed curators, artists and writers to investigate this, like Aidan, and to question why there are so few disabled curators. We're working with partners, including DASH, that's Disability Arts Shropshire, to deliver programmes of work that will help the visual arts sector to catch up. One of the biggest barriers to becoming a professional artist in the UK is making the leap from the safety net of welfare payments across to self-employment and a reliance on being well enough to consistently earn a living. There is a lot of fear and confusion around this, and the Department for Work and Pensions does not make it easy to understand or trust that the state has your back if it all goes wrong. Unfortunately, in its current state, the system makes navigating the bureaucracy more of a full-time job than the actual creation of work. Although Disability Arts Online supports a strong online community of disabled creative people nationally and internationally, we know that isolation is a particularly challenging issue. There are also health-related barriers too. In this era that is post-lockdown, where many people with compromised immune systems continue to isolate, actually attending arts events is pretty much impossible. At Disability Arts Online, we occupy a space in which we can help to connect artists with each other and with organisations digitally. We can help to reduce isolation, and we can help to nurture a community of creatives who are connected through the experience of the barriers that they face in the world. We have, just very briefly, 4 programmes of work that enable us to do this. That's our creative programme, the stuff you see on our website and social media, our talent development programme, such as the Associate Artist Programme, webinars and one-to-ones, our sector development work, helping other organisations to understand barriers, become more accessible and to programme disabled artists. And finally, our own organisational development work to live and breathe our values and to enshrine them in innovative policy and to keep pushing and developing best practice in the way that we deliver our work. And just one final thought, I know I'm going over time, on where we sit internationally. I think it's fair to say that the UK is seen as a leader in the field of arts and disability. Half our audiences come from outside the UK, but we have our own unique history and context, which I've tried to give a flavour of today. Through the historic investment in the UK, we as a sector have developed some useful tools and systems that might work in other countries too. But my interest in international collaboration is to understand how different countries are approaching inclusion and access. And we really want to seek out the opportunities for creative collaboration that bring light to new stories and new artworks. So I'll hand back to Aidan. Thank you.
I was just saying thanks, Trish, and nice to give that overview and also to bring it back to the international collaboration element. I just want to briefly reflect on my experience of coming to Norway and being an artist and a curator who identifies as disabled and neurodivergent. And I think part of that is around the language in which we use around disability and access. And also, as Trish said, it's easy to think that, you know, coming from the UK, we've got it all sorted. And having really benefited from the disability arts ecology in the UK, not just like artistically, but personally, as well as professionally. When you go to a new country, you think you're always, whether you want to or not, I think you always compare where you've come from to where you are. And it's easy to kind of be lulled to thinking, where is everybody? And, you know, as Stina highlighted, there are people out there making work, but it's just that there's an element about the visibility of that. And one of the things that I really enjoy about the UK disability arts is the peer element to it, where you can feel safe and cared for within that environment. And it's almost like the family which you choose to be with, rather than sometimes the family in which you're given. And it's also a space where you don't have to explain yourself, where you don't have to face that constant, what's wrong with you? And or you look normal to me. And as Trish said, it's that we kind of get lulled and access is taken as a norm. And, you know, we can't always get access right. So when I came to Norway, I was thinking, where are my peers? How do I find them? And I'm still looking for them. But I think the element that is important is that Norway is a completely different context to the UK. And it's easy to say, but this isn't here, and to sound critical. But that is just coming from my experience. I don't understand fully the Norwegian context. You haven't had the same social struggles around disability and access. And I think to a degree, when we were at Nook with Trish and Tina and myself doing the talk for at Festspillene, there was a couple of artists in the room who said, yes, I identify as disabled, but I wouldn't identify as disabled like more openly or out there. And then I wonder why that is. And part of it reminds me about like maybe 10 years ago in the UK when I would identify as being disabled, and then that instantly devalued me as a person and as a professional. My work was looked less favorably on or not as good as. And it's about placing like a dance, you know, coda, the work that Stina's done with Kanduko, what we heard from Georgie. It's like dance is a little bit, and theatre is a bit more of an easy sell rather than visual arts or curating. And then it's like thinking about access riders. It's like, why would you pay anybody just to take a day off or to be able to have a room to sleep in between 12 and 2, or to change the working system instead of like 8 till 4 or 9 till 5. Why can't I work, you know, 10 at night till 1 in the morning, because that's when I can do my best work. And it's, you know, it's like thinking about individuals and their access needs. And yeah, so part of the reason about like wanting to come to Nook and also have this seminar is to begin to drill down so that we can understand. I think that we all want to make change and we all want to create change and be part of that. But it's like, how do we do it? How do we talk openly? And, you know, it struck me that Georgie mentioned about getting it wrong and not knowing. And, you know, and also it's that it's a conversation which is never finished, because access needs change and people change. And, you know, as somebody who identifies as neurodivergent, it's like you know, and feeling not understood, or how do I explain that in a Norwegian context? You know, that I process information differently, and that it's not about like a cognitive impairment. It doesn't mean to say that I'm any less intelligent. It just means to say that I work things through differently. And it's about adapting. And a lot of the conversation that I hear in Norway around diversity and inclusion is, a lot of it at the moment seems to be about race and gender and trans, and disability seems to be less of a vocal thing. And I just wonder why that is. And this isn't a criticism, it's just an opening up of how do we start and talk more openly, and that it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to use the wrong language. And also we can't do it all at once at the same time. It's like, let's not overpromise. Let's take baby steps and get one thing, you know. Yeah. So anyway, that's just a brief reflection on like what kind of where I am. And if that seems a bit incoherent, that kind of reflects where I am in my kind of journey between the UK and Norway. Yeah, so now I would like to open it up to the floor for questions and comments. One of the things that struck me about Georgie's talk was about getting it wrong, and also I'm interested in her as a, you know, as a not identifying as disabled. And very often we talk about fear, and I would be interested to know, how did Georgie overcome, or if she did have any fear about working with disabled and wheelchair users. Are you here, Georgie? No.
Yes. Hello. Yes, I am.
Right. Thank you.
Figuring out the phone. I mean, of course, like there were like uncertainties and reservations, but I guess I had this slight comfort in knowing that I am, I think, a kind person, that I give off an energy that's honest in wanting to understand, and not for any trend or extra political reasons, just because I really want to connect with people that I meet and work with in the studio. So as soon as I met these people, they were just so wonderful also in how they made me feel. it just didn't last more than a second. It was thoughts before entering the studio, yes, of gosh, what if I offend or upset and so on, but they just already made me feel so at ease. So there's a responsibility on both sides to give that energy of openness. Yeah, that it means both sides can just communicate to the full effect, I suppose. But yeah, I was nervous before, I'll admit.
Okay, and I know that you can't speak for the Opera House, but I'm just interested in how, like, it's one thing being an individual practitioner, but I think that one of the, a lot of gatekeepers are institutions, and those institutions have to change. And I wonder about like embedding some of the practice that you learned through and also you, Stina, as well as a kind of a festival. You have leverage, you have power. You could say that we're only going to use your venue if it's accessible. Or so I wonder if you could both talk just a little bit about that and about what being individuals within institutions.
Mm-hmm. Stina, would you like to start? Or
well, no, yes, I can, in the sense that, yes, of course, we know that as institutions we have that power to make an impact, and I think that's why I mentioned earlier, we're very lucky to be a festival that works with so many of the main venues for dance and in Oslo and the area around, because I think everybody actually really wants to make a difference. Everybody already have very clear access and universal design venues. Everybody has very clear intentions and training their front of house staff for access, all these things. But what we found when we were doing the project was, of course, that we realized that we hadn't made space for enough wheelchair spaces, for example, in the audience before the tickets went on sale. We managed to do that with Dance and Sus. We were really on top of it, and we didn't, for example, with the opera in the same way. We are looking, I think we're still looking for those to be able to think ahead in every situation of the practical access, and not make that sort of an extra. So I think routines, practical ways to work, thinking about access is something that we as festival can influence and have. But what we are finding is that all the venues are absolutely positive and wanting to make change happen. I think, as Rosie, why do I keep saying Rosie? As Georgie said, it's also in the moment when you're practically there and you're working together that the learning and the things you hadn't thought about happens. So that happened in our project, the opera. It also happens within the festival. We were working last year with Sebastian Kjørstad as an access host for us. So for the audiences to have a host that he himself is a disabled artist, just that. At the moment, we work with Sebastian in the festival with particular funding from the Arts Council for their aspirantordning, their 1 year special, where they give funding particularly to have more professionals working in the arts with disabilities. And again, just practically working with Sebastian in our office, of course, every day brings up some thoughts, some questions, some practical change, and it makes us realize that it's something that, as you said, is a constant, and that needs those moments, like Georgie said, to actually practically go, my attitude is very inclusive, but how do I actually do this practically?
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to just add one little thought, but I also wonder that this talk today has made me think also, as an aspiring choreographer, we're meant to make art that resonates with the moment or fulfills or connects to some societal need in the time. And maybe as somebody that's beginning my choreographic career, a bit of responsibility falls on me to also also ask a company, I'd like to work with this disabled dancer. That's something that I need to think about. That's something I would really like to push. And a house like this one here, they're very open to suggestions. It's a good communicative space. So thank you for the question, because this has got me thinking.
Thank you. I would like to go to Kaya Yara. So, yeah, so thank you for coming and attending, and thanks to Tina and Trish and Stina and Georgie. And just, yeah, thank you. There's been some amazing comments. Thanks for the comments in the chat. I think one of the things that has come through in the chat is also has been the fact about the safe space, and I think that's really important in order to, you know, to feel like you can make a change, because we don't always get change right at the first attempt, and that we learn by getting things wrong, and then we need to be able to have that safe environment in order to get it wrong and then make it better. So yes, so thanks to all the. Sorry, Tina.
No, could I just add, there are some reflections in the chat that haven't been sort of addressed in the room that I think are really good to look into. So I suggest everybody reads the chat after. Are we going to send it out to the participants, or can we do that?
Yeah, we absolutely can. Yeah.
Okay, so that, because there are many good reflections that have been sent out there.
Great. If I could just ask the people who've spoken this morning, Tina and Stina and Georgie and Trish, to stay on the line, and it just leads me to say thank you very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.